tell me how tricky the car was to drive out there today?
Same as always.
You tried the higher downforce wing. No better for you at all in that session?
No, really not.
Anything positive you can take into tomorrow? Will it be a bit of a testing session for you, the sprint race, do you feel?
The weather's nice.
Sorry.
The weather's nice.
Well, I hope tomorrow's better. Thanks, Lewis. Thanks.
Cheers.
Lewis Hamilton giving answers.
What leads a seven-time world champion to say in public that he no longer wants to compete? How does the illusion of wearing red transform into an unprecedented emotional ordeal? Today we are going to break down Hamilton's free fall in Ferrari and the phrase that paralyzed the entire paddock. The 2025 Qatar Grand Prix, specifically the sprint qualifying day at the Lusail circuit, not only marked a new low point for Lewis Hamilton in his professional career, but also opened a public wound in the relationship between one of the greatest of all time and the most emblematic team in history. Since his arrival at Ferrari, Hamilton had generated enormous expectations. It wasn't just a signing, it was the symbol of an era. The seven-time champion who left Mercedes, his home for more than a decade, to close his sporting career dressed in red. The romanticism was evident. The narrative was written. But what was not foreseen was that this story would turn into a tragedy. During sprint qualifying in Qatar, Hamilton's elimination in the first round of the dreaded SQ1 session was not just a bad result. It was a brutal blow to his sporting credibility in this new cycle. He finished in 18th position, ahead only of cars with technical problems or without any rhythm. There were no excuses. There were no strategic failures. The car was working correctly. The conditions were similar for everyone. And yet, Lewis was nowhere near entering the next phase. In Formula One, a mistake can be assumed, a technical failure can be discussed, but being eliminated without tangible justification is an alarming sign. And the most devastating thing was not what happened on the track. That's what came next. The image of Hamilton taking off his helmet with a blank expression and walking towards the paddock without even stopping to greet the engineers was the beginning of what was to come. When approached by the press, his choice of words left the motorsport world frozen. They asked him if there was anything positive to take away from the day, and he answered without hesitation, "The weather is pleasant." That phrase, as ironic as it was painful, was not a joke. It was the verbalization of an internal defeat. But what followed was even starker. He said, "I'm just slow. It's the same every weekend." The car felt relatively decent, no problems. There's not much more to say. When a champion speaks like this, the impact transcends sports. It is the equivalent of a surrender. He didn't blame the team, he didn't blame the tires or even the rivals. He blamed himself. That self-attribution is not common for Hamilton, a driver who has built his career on almost unwavering confidence. What he conveyed in Qatar was not humility, it was discouragement. This moment is not isolated. It is the reflection of an accumulation of frustrations that have been growing since his arrival at Ferrari. From the pre-season test to the first Grand Prix of the year, the Briton has shown signs of discomfort, of lack of harmony with the SF25, of a car that does not respond to his aggressive driving style, particularly at corner entry. At Lusail, those deficiencies were amplified on a high-speed circuit that punishes a lack of confidence. While Charles Leclerc at least managed to place himself in the middle of the table, Hamilton was stuck at the bottom with no room for improvement. But the most dramatic element is that this is not a crisis episode. It's the pattern. He said it himself, it's the same thing every weekend. When a driver of Hamilton's stature publicly acknowledges that his performance is stagnant and that he sees no way out, what we have is not a temporary problem. It is a collapse of competitive identity. And that, in a sport as relentless as Formula One, is the difference between glory and oblivion. From the first lap of the season, it was clear that something was not right between Lewis Hamilton and the SF25. In theory, Ferrari had designed a car that should enhance the virtues of its drivers, with a focus on stability in medium and high corners, and a more predictable platform under braking. But in practice, Hamilton never managed to find the basic confidence to push the car to the limit. In Qatar, this divorce between driver and machine became irrefutable. To understand what exactly is happening, you have to get technical. Unlike Charles Leclerc, who has known Ferrari's DNA for years, Hamilton has had to adapt to a completely different car than what he drove at Mercedes. The SF25 has a mass distribution and a suspension philosophy that requires more aggressive handling and lateral transfer, something that does not fit with Hamilton's style, which historically has gotten the most out of cars that are stable under braking and have smooth corner entry. On the other hand, the Ferrari is unstable on the rear axle when braking hard, and at the same time requires total confidence to rotate in the middle phase of the corner. For a driver who lives off the sensitivity of the front end like Lewis, this behavior is an invisible wall. At Lusail, that disconnect materialized in the form of constant blocking, especially when entering medium-speed corners. The data leaked from the Ferrari pit shows that Hamilton was unable to maintain the ideal temperature in the front tires, which, added to the overheating of the rear axle, completely compromised his traction. The result wasn't just a slow car, it was an unpredictable car. And in Formula One, unpredictability kills confidence. But the real collapse is not just in the data. It's in the pilot's voice. During the team's internal radio stations, although not all of them were broadcast to the public, Hamilton repeated phrases such as, "I don't know what else to do. I feel like I'm driving another car, and I can't push without losing control." These statements show that there is not only a technical gap, but also a progressive emotional exhaustion. This is crucial because Hamilton is not a rookie. He is a driver who has known how to adapt to different generations of cars, hybrid engines, changes in aerodynamic regulations and tires with absurdly narrow thermal windows. He has dealt with understeering cars in his early years with McLaren and with aggressive oversteers like the Mercedes W13. But now, at 40 years old, he seems to have reached the limit of his ability to adapt. And that is the big difference between a performance slump and an identity crisis. Because if something has characterized Hamilton in his career, it is resilience. However, what we see in 2025 is not a pilot in the process of adaptation, but one that is beginning to wonder if it is worth continuing to try. Since their elimination from the sprint standings, there has not been a single sign of anger or public demands on the team. He hasn't hit the steering wheel. He hasn't shouted on the radio. He has not asked for radical changes. Instead, he has shown passive acceptance. Phrases like, "It's the same every weekend," do not reflect helplessness, but rather resignation. And for a champion, resigning is much more dangerous than failing. This attitude has begun to creep into Ferrari's decisions as well. Instead of redesigning the car around Hamilton's preferences, the team is prioritizing maintaining a balanced platform for both drivers. That leaves the Briton in an even more complex position. Not only does he have to adapt to a difficult car, but he knows that it will not be modified for him. And all this is aggravated by a season context in which Ferrari needs immediate results. The team is coming off a hopeful 2024, was on the verge of the Constructors' title and has bet a large part of its future on this Leclerc-Hamilton pairing. But in practice, what is being generated is a silent fracture, a clash of worlds between the hope of a final legacy and the reality of a pilot who no longer feels part of the project. Lewis Hamilton's fall at Ferrari is no longer a story of failed adaptation. It is a red alert that spreads throughout the structure of the Italian team and the paddock in general. Because when the most high-profile signing of the last decade collapses emotionally and sportingly in just 3 races, the repercussions are inevitable. Not just for him, also for Ferrari, and for the entire narrative of this season. And here comes one of the most worrying aspects. This is not just any season. It is 2025, the last year before the great technical revolution of 2026. All teams are already channeling part of their resources to the development of the new regulations. If Ferrari considers that Hamilton will not be able to be competitive this year, they could relegate him to a secondary role, which would imply that his weight in the design of the 2026 car will also be minimal. That is to say, not only would he be off the pace this year, but he would enter the new technical era from a marginal position. That, for a driver of his caliber, could be the beginning of the end. In the paddock, reactions are varied. Some veterans defend it, ensuring that the problem is one of adaptation, that it needs time and that it should not be underestimated. But others, especially analysts and former drivers, are beginning to wonder if Hamilton has lost his hunger. Because when a driver begins to verbalize that he no longer feels like it, the competitive instinct, which is the soul of the elite athlete, begins to fade. It is not a question of talent or technique. It is desire. The British press, traditionally its media bastion, has begun to change its tone. They no longer talk about the adaptation phase. They talk about disappointment. And in Italy, the criticism is even harsher. The headlines focus on phrases like, "the shadow of the champion," or "Ferrari was waiting for a leader and found a ghost." Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.